Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dance Teacher Pep Talk. I am your host, Amanda, and I am so glad you are here. This is a space for dance teachers and anyone interested in teaching dance who is looking for motivation and fresh ideas. As teachers, we spend our days motivating and giving pep talks to our students, and now this podcast is a pep talk just for you. We hope that it helps to ignite new ideas and even work through some deep dance related thoughts before you head into the studio. Thank you for your support, and now let's get into today's episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dance Teacher Pep Talk. Today's episode is going to be a fun one and hopefully an inspiring one. And I know that so many of us may still be in recital mode, but soon after that, so many of us then fall into preparation for our upcoming season, including our upcoming competition season plans. And I know that different studios do this differently, but maybe you do auditions right after recital. Maybe you audition during your summer programs, or maybe you do an invite only type of thing for team. But whichever way you do it, this is definitely something that is on the mind at this time of year. And I know that I spoke in my end of year closing reflection episode that it's always so important, if we can, to take a break after that recital so that we can decompress, get back to ourselves, and prepare our mind for what is to come. And so after we do all of that, then comes the brainstorming for the next year and the new season. And when it comes to competition, sometimes that includes starting to plan your groupings. Maybe you're planning for choreographers, selecting events, securing deposits. Maybe you're even starting new pieces over the summer. And there's just so much more. And, some of these things we really do need to do during the summer months for preparation so that we are on schedule and on task for what we need in the year to come. And with that, I thought this would be a great opportunity to do this episode of the podcast because it's one that is really near and dear to my heart. And I'm super excited about it because it's something that I just have found really helpful for me in my choreography, and I'm hoping that it will be helpful for you too. Now, towards the end of June, I will have an episode coming out about tips and tricks I have for preparing for the new competition season in a competition administrative viewpoint. But today's episode is going to be specifically about choreography and planning for your pieces. So this episode is perfect if you do competition choreography, or even if you do choreography for shows and other types of performances. Any type of choreography that you're doing, this episode could be very helpful for you. So I don't know if you're like me, but when I was young in my teaching, ideas would flow to me so easily for choreography. Like I really felt that I'd have a whole list of songs and ideas for the next year, starting in March of the current season. Like competition was just beginning for one year and I already had the next year, or some ideas at least, for the next year planned. But once I started taking on more pieces, I wasn't able to come up with so many ideas as quickly. And at times I felt I was straining my brain to think up things. And I know I've spoken about this in other episodes, but I also fell into the trap of comparing my pieces in the sense of like, okay, well, this year was so great. How can next year be better? And trying to kind of like one up myself. And so that was always a tricky thing to battle as well. But I've definitely grown out of that in a way because I just look at the creative process a lot differently now. And I appreciate anytime a creative work comes through and I'm able to put it on the dancers and see it come to life. I just appreciate the process so much more. So for me, it's not so much about, one-upping the last year. But, as I was going through this time where ideas just weren't flowing to me as they used to, and I didn't have things prepared ahead of time, I started to develop and learn some tips and tricks to strategize ways to spark my inspiration for new piece ideas. And so today I'm going to share 3 of those tips with you. And in another episode, I'll share even more because I have so many, but I figured 3 is a good place to start today. So my hope is that these 3 tips that I'm about to share will help you as you start to formulate your plan for the upcoming season and to find inspiration in new ways. Now, of course, music is always an inspiration. Like, there are so many times where I'll find a piece of music and I'll be like, oh, I love this song. I have to use this for a piece. And that was an easy one. You're just finding music you love and creating a playlist. Maybe you have a running playlist of songs that you hope to choreograph to. And through the years, that list may change here and there. But that is always a huge source of inspiration. But what happens when those amazing pieces of music aren't coming through? Or what happens when you're only finding a couple and you have so many pieces that you have to choreograph in a given season? So if the music search is causing you a massive headache, these 3 tips may help you to start to formulate ideas for your pieces without having music first. So let's get into it. All right, so tip number 1. The first tip I'm going to share is using monumental years in your life or big life events to spark pieces, almost like a brought to life movement journal for yourself. Now, the dancers can either be involved with knowing the deeper meaning behind these pieces that you have, or they don't. That's totally up to you. It could be that you hold the connection so strongly to this piece and you keep the story to yourself and you just share what the dance is about in a separated form of it, like, just a general storyline. But of course, they might not realize like how deeply connected to it that you are. And what really gave me this inspiration was one year, Emily Schock, who I absolutely love her work, she did a bunch of pieces from Sleeping at Last's yearbook album. So this is the album that Sleeping at Last has divided by months almost. And I thought, what a cool concept, not only for her, but for Sleeping at Last as well. And of course, I love Sleeping at Last. It's a beautiful music, just absolutely beautiful. But I started after seeing this, I started looking at the years in my life as inspiration for pieces because of all of this. And so, for example, a really monumental year in my life was the year that I got married. So that year, I decided, as I was planning the wedding, getting ready to get married, I wanted to have all of the competition pieces that I was doing, groups, not solos, but I wanted to have all of these pieces that I was doing be connected to what I was going through in the wedding preparation stages. And so I mentioned that this is specifically for groups because for solos, I work a little differently choreography wise because I want to make sure the soloist has a deep connection to what they're doing. And so the year that I was getting married, the soloist probably would not have that same connection. So this tip really pertains particularly to groups. All right, so getting back to the wedding preparation, if you're like, okay, what does this even look like? I'm going to kind of break it down. So I did a contemporary piece about flowers forming different bouquets. And that was just such a visually beautiful piece. Like the costumes were stunning. The visuals were beautiful. It was really, it always stands out in my mind. I did a jazz piece about standing my ground and holding my vision. Not necessarily like a bridezilla piece, but more like I know what I want. I'm going to hold that vision. And I used the song Stand Down by Little Mix. And then I did a lyrical piece about what I felt the ceremony would feel like. I used benches as props. And, there were other pieces too, but I think you may get the idea. But what was so beautiful about that year, so we're coming up on our 8th year anniversary. And so these pieces were done 9 years ago because I did it the year before when I was in the planning stages. And I can still so vividly see these pieces in my mind. It was such an impactful year and it was such a beautiful year. And the dancers had so much fun with it too. Like they knew that I was doing a wedding preparation year type of thing with my pieces. But they were just so happy to be involved and to have these works come to life through their movement. And so I felt that was such an impactful way to do my choreography that year for the competition season. I felt like I had a life diary I can always look back on, which involved my dancers who are such a huge part of my daily life. And so it's not only a beautiful memory for me to have of the wedding preparation time, but also of the dancers who I was working with at that time, and just to share in that excitement that we had during that year. The second tip that I have is, I'm not really sure what to call it, so I'm going to call it silent aware driving. So this is a tip where you go for a drive, you don't play music, you don't have a podcast going on in the background, no sound, and just really be aware. Try not to force this or it won't work. And you may need to do this a couple of times for it to work, because if you do it with an intention of force, like you're constantly looking for things, nothing is really going to flow through to you. It just needs to be like a conscious awareness. And maybe, depending on where you live, if you live in the city and you don't drive, maybe this could be like a ride on the public transportation or on the subway, or maybe even just a walk. I do find though that a walk, depending on where you are, may be tougher, because I think driving provides like more options in a given amount of time, just due to the speed that you're able, to drive in a car. So anyways, let's get back to this silent aware traveling, we'll call it. All right. So when you're doing this, like, things to ask is, what is around you? What are you seeing? What signs are you reading? What is being advertised? Are there any, billboards that you're seeing, or, community flyers and things like that? And take a mental note in your head of the things that really stand out to you. And if something really is grabbing your attention, I would even like make a voice note on your phone, or pull over and write on a Post-it note if you have something available. And allow yourself to really, drive or travel for a bit so that you can get in flow with your thoughts. One time I did this, and I saw a local art museum was advertising for a still life exhibit, and my wheels immediately started turning, and it ended up creating a really cool piece from that inspiration where we were using still life inspiration. And I kind of went off with that on this whole different kind of movement track that inspired my choreography for that particular piece. So that is another idea of where you can find inspiration that isn't necessarily from the music that you have. And I should say too, going back to music, because you're probably thinking also like, okay, well, you have all these ideas for pieces. How do you find music that goes along with it? And, sometimes it comes down to like finding an instrumental piece that really connects with your storyline. Or maybe it's like, okay, going back to the wedding year, the piece that was about the ceremony, like, a common theme at a wedding is love and celebrating that love. So I looked for songs that, either had the love in the title, like I would search like that on my Spotify or my Apple Music, or, looking through the songs that I already had that, had a love theme to them that I thought would really beautifully portray what I was hoping to portray. So, searching by keywords, searching by themes, whether it's on YouTube or whatever music platform that you use to find music, that can always be a way to find music to fit these pieces. And when it came time for the still life piece, I was, there were so many songs that I loved, and I was like, what piece could represent this concept of still life? And like, it almost created like a dual storyline, because you had the story that the artist wrote, that the musical artist wrote with the lyrics, and then also the story that I layered on top of it with the still life influence. So there's so many ways that you can go about finding music and making it work. All right, today's third and final tip kind of connects to the second tip as well. It's similar to the silent aware traveling, but this one is looking around at objects in your view and seeing what inspiration for movement can you pull from. So if you're looking around, like say you just decide to like sit down in your living room and you're looking around at different objects in your space, is anything popping out to you that could even become a prop that could be used? Like with the still life inspiration, I used a picture frame as a prop focus, but sometimes the objects you see, they might not spark a prop idea, but just the piece idea itself. So like if you're looking at your water bottle, you're not maybe thinking about like a water bottle piece, but maybe you're thinking about something with the concept of water, the water within it. This scarf, this blanket, how does it move? Would you use it in a piece? Would you use the flow of a scarf to create inspiration for a whole movement? I remember one year I loved the song, well, I mean, I still do, but one year I loved the song Details in the Fabric, and I wanted to actually use fabric in the piece and, really try to innovatively create movement by using, a square piece of fabric or whatnot to kind of not only dance on, but to dance with, to wrap around and things like that. So like just by looking at the objects that you have around you, that may even kind of create a reverse inspiration where it's like, oh, this is a cool prop. I definitely want to try to incorporate it somehow. Let's find some music that would work with it. Another thing about objects too, that this is a really great improv exercise that you can incorporate into your classes, but tracing objects in the space with different body parts. I always like to do this because I think it's a great challenge, not only in, spatial awareness and what is around you, but also about how we can use our body in different ways and also how we can move different parts of our body. And this always seems to really create very unique movement. So, if you're looking around your space, can you trace that trash can in space using just your torso? Can you trace the stereo using your nose? And looking at what movement does that create? Sometimes when I do this exercise in my classes too, I have it done in 2 groups. And one group may have another dancer that they're watching and the other group are back and forth, kind of like a partners thing. And they have to guess, what objects did that person just trace? So not only are we seeing this like really cool and interesting movement, but we're also trying to like see, can we guess what the shape was? So that's just a fun one too. But when you're going into that movement by tracing the objects, you may find this whole different level of movement that you can create. And that I think is just such a cool way to try new movement on and try it with your phrasing and setting a piece that way. So, I have so many more inspiration ideas that I could share here on Dance Teacher Pep Talk, and I definitely will. But I just wanted to send out 3 today because I feel like that is a good start. And for those of you who are looking for a little bit of inspiration in different places, these are 3 ones that you could definitely try on. The life diary one may take a little bit, but you could even look at it like in this past year, was there anything really impactful that happened to you or around you or anything like that you just feel like really could come out movement wise and just kind of, going through it that way. The life diary one I feel like does take a little more time. But if you're just, going out for a casual drive and you want to look for signs for inspiration, there's a tip that you could try right there. And even too, like I said, just within the room you're sitting in, looking at the objects around you, is there anything that you feel could spark an entire piece? And you'll be so amazed at what you see because there is inspiration everywhere. And we are so creative as, this is our job, dance teachers, choreographers, etc. We are so very creative in what we can bring to life with our movement. And so just using these tips as ways to spark your creativity even further. So I want to thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of Dance Teacher Pep Talk. If you felt like these ideas were helpful for you and you want to share with a friend or colleague, I so appreciate that. And I want to thank you all for your support and your listens. Don't forget to follow at Dance Teacher Pep Talk on Instagram, where I will continue to share other inspiring ideas as well. But I appreciate you all so much. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening.